CEO meets a social worker who changes his worldview. An audio story. In the heart of New York City's bustling financial district, towering skyscrapers stood as monuments to power and ambition. Among them, the glass and steel fortress of Drake Industries symbolized corporate dominance and ruthless efficiency. The building's sleek, mirrored facade reflected the city's relentless pace, a fitting representation of the man who commanded it, Alexander Drake. Alexander, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that complemented his tall, athletic frame, strode through the halls of his empire with an air of unassailable authority. His piercing blue eyes, sharp as a hawk's, missed nothing as he moved with purpose. His presence alone commanded attention and respect, causing whispers to cease and employees to stand a little straighter as he passed. Rising to the top of the corporate world, Alexander's journey was marked by a series of aggressive takeovers and strategic decisions that left no room for weakness or sentiment. Competitors who underestimated him learned quickly that he was not just a player in the game but a master of it. Known for his uncompromising nature, Alexander's reputation as a ruthless businessman preceded him, earning him the moniker the Iron CEO within industry circles. That morning, Alexander stood in his corner office. A panoramic view of the city sprawled out before him. The sunlight glinted off the skyscrapers, a testament to his achievements. His latest venture, a high-stakes merger with Nexus Tech, a leading tech company, promised to solidify his dominance in the market. The deal was poised to create a conglomerate unrivaled in scope and power. Alexander reviewed the final documents for the merger, a faint smile playing on his lips. Leveraging insider information, he had orchestrated a hostile takeover, showing no regard for ethical boundaries. Employees at Nexus Tech were being laid off without notice, and smaller competitors were crushed under the weight of his ambition. It was business as usual for Alexander, win at all costs. His executive assistant, Rachel, entered the office with a sense of urgency. "Mr. Drake, there's an issue with the merger," she said, her voice tinged with apprehension. Alexander looked up, his smile vanishing. "What kind of issue?" "Several board members are threatening to back out. They're concerned about the negative publicity surrounding our tactics," Rachel explained, placing a folder on his desk. Alexander's eyes narrowed as he scanned the contents. Articles and opinion pieces lambasted his methods, painting him as a villain in the corporate world. Rumors of his cutthroat tactics had spread, tarnishing his reputation and casting a shadow over his accomplishments. He clenched his jaw. "Get me a meeting with the board immediately. I'll handle this." As Rachel left to arrange the meeting, Alexander turned to the window, his reflection staring back at him. He had always believed that in business, the end justified the means. The boardroom buzzed with tension as Alexander entered, his expression unreadable. The members of the Nexus Tech board sat around the polished mahogany table, their faces etched with uncertainty. Alexander took his seat at the head of the table, his gaze sweeping over the room. "Let's get straight to the point," he began, his voice steady and commanding. "I understand there are concerns about the merger." A board member, Richard Lawson, cleared his throat. "It's more than just concerns, Mr. Drake. The media backlash has been severe, and several key stakeholders are threatening to withdraw their support. Our stock prices are plummeting." Alexander's eyes hardened. "Stock prices can recover. This merger is crucial for both our companies. We cannot afford to back down now." "But at what cost?" another member interjected. "Our employees are demoralized, and our reputation is in tatters. We can't ignore the ethical implications of our actions." Alexander leaned forward, his gaze intense. "We didn't get to where we are by worrying about ethics. This is business. We need to focus on the end goal." Richard shook his head. "I'm afraid the board disagrees. We're voting to halt the merger until we can reassess our strategy and address these concerns." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Alexander's grip tightened on the edge of the table. For the first time in his career, he was facing a rebellion from within. The merger, once a sure thing, was slipping through his fingers. "Very well," he said, his voice icy. We'll regroup and come up with a plan to address these issues. But make no mistake, this merger will happen. As the board members filed out, Alexander remained seated, staring at the empty room. The weight of the failed deal settled heavily on his shoulders. For a man who had built his empire on unyielding control, this loss was a bitter pill to swallow. Returning to his office, Alexander found Rachel waiting with a concerned look. "Mr. Drake, there's something else. Your sister called. It's about your father." Alexander's heart sank. His father, who had always been his greatest supporter and harshest critic, had been battling a serious illness for months. Alexander had thrown himself into his work, using it as a distraction from the reality of his father's declining health. "What's happened?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "His condition has worsened. They're not sure how much time he has left," Rachel said gently. Alexander felt a wave of emotions crash over him. Guilt, fear, and a deep sense of loss. He had been so consumed by his ambitions that he had neglected the people who mattered most. The ruthless CEO facade cracked, revealing the vulnerable man beneath. "I need to go see him," Alexander said, rising from his chair. Rachel nodded. "I'll clear your schedule." As Alexander dealt with the turmoil in his personal and professional life, a different kind of meeting was set in motion, one that would challenge his very beliefs. Sarah Thompson, a passionate social entrepreneur, was in the midst of preparing for her next community outreach event. Unlike Alexander, whose world was driven by profit and power, Sarah's world revolved around making a positive impact on society. Sarah ran HopeWorks, a nonprofit organization dedicated to uplifting underprivileged communities through education, healthcare, and job training programs. Her days were spent in the field, working directly with people to improve their lives. Petite yet fiercely determined, Sarah's green eyes sparkled with a warmth and compassion that resonated deeply with everyone she met. Sarah's reputation as a dedicated and effective leader had earned her respect and admiration within the nonprofit sector. Her methods, rooted in empathy and collaboration, stood in stark contrast to Alexander's cutthroat approach. She believed in the power of community and the importance of ethical leadership. Their paths crossed at a city council meeting, where corporate leaders and community advocates had gathered to discuss a new development project. Drake Industries, as the primary investor, faced strong opposition from local activists who feared the project would displace vulnerable communities. Alexander, seeing this as a minor inconvenience, attended the meeting to assert his company's position. As he entered the council chamber, he immediately noticed Sarah, who was addressing the council with passion and conviction. "This project, as it stands, will force hundreds of families out of their homes," she argued. "We need to find a solution that benefits everyone, not just the investors." Alexander, unimpressed, waited for his turn to speak. When he finally stood, his tone was dismissive. "While I appreciate the concerns raised, the economic benefits of this project are undeniable. We are creating jobs and driving growth. The needs of the few should not outweigh the greater good." Sarah met his gaze, her eyes filled with determination. "The needs of the few are just as important as the needs of the many, Mr. Drake. These are real people with real lives, not just statistics on a balance sheet." Their exchange set the tone for their relationship, tense and confrontational. Alexander saw Sarah as an idealistic nuisance, a threat to his business interests. Sarah viewed Alexander as the embodiment of everything wrong with corporate greed. Despite their mutual disdain, there was an undeniable spark between them, a clash of wills that hinted at something deeper. As the meeting ended, Sarah approached Alexander. "Mr. Drake, I hope you'll reconsider your approach. There's a way to make this project work without harming the community." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "And what do you propose?" "Let's sit down and discuss it. I believe we can find common ground if we try," Sarah suggested, her voice unwavering. Alexander smirked. "I don't have time for idealistic fantasies, but I'll consider your offer, if only to prove you wrong." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Sarah standing there, undeterred. The following week, Alexander and Sarah met in the conference room of Drake Industries, a room adorned with sleek furniture and state-of-the-art technology. The stark contrast between their worlds was evident from the moment they sat down. Alexander began the meeting with a confident smirk. "So, Sarah, what brilliant plan do you have to save the world this time?" Sarah ignored his sarcasm, focusing instead on the presentation she had meticulously prepared. "We can modify the development plan to include affordable housing units and community centers. This way, we ensure that the existing residents benefit from the project rather than being displaced." Alexander leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "And how exactly do you propose we fund these changes? This is a business, not a charity. We can allocate a portion of the project's budget to these initiatives. It might reduce immediate profits, but it will foster goodwill and long-term community support, which is invaluable," Sarah countered, her tone firm. Alexander's eyes narrowed. "Goodwill doesn't pay the bills, Sarah. We're here to make money. And people like you are why communities suffer." Sarah shot back, her frustration evident. "There's more to business than profit. There's a responsibility to the people affected by your actions." The tension in the room was palpable. Alexander saw Sarah as an obstacle to his success, while Sarah viewed Alexander as a heartless capitalist. Their differing philosophies clashed at every turn, with Alexander prioritizing financial gain and Sarah advocating for social responsibility. As their meeting ended without resolution, Alexander decided to take more aggressive measures. He began lobbying city officials to push the project through without the modifications Sarah had proposed. He also launched a PR campaign to discredit HopeWorks, portraying the nonprofit as an impediment to progress. Sarah, undeterred, rallied her supporters and intensified her community outreach efforts. She organized protests, leveraged social media, and garnered the backing of influential community leaders. Her resolve was unwavering, and her passion inspired those around her. The rivalry between Alexander and Sarah escalated rapidly. Alexander attempted to sabotage Sarah's initiatives by spreading misinformation and using his connections to undermine her efforts. He even orchestrated a smear campaign, painting her as an obstructionist hindering economic growth. But Sarah's dedication and integrity shone through. She countered Alexander's attacks with transparency and facts, earning widespread support. Her nonprofit received an influx of donations and volunteers, bolstering her ability to fight back against Drake Industries. Despite Alexander's relentless efforts, Sarah's unwavering commitment and the growing support of the community began to take a toll on him. He found himself constantly frustrated by her resilience and the respect she commanded. In a particularly heated confrontation, Alexander confronted Sarah at one of her community meetings. "You can't win this, Sarah. My resources are limitless. You're fighting a losing battle." Sarah met his glare with a steady gaze. "This isn't about winning or losing, Alexander. It's about doing what's right. And that's something you'll never understand." Their rivalry reached a boiling point, each determined to outmaneuver the other. Yet, beneath the animosity, a grudging respect began to form. Alexander couldn't deny Sarah's tenacity and her genuine concern for the community. And Sarah, despite her disdain for Alexander's methods, saw glimpses of his potential for change. Fate intervened when the city council mandated that Drake Industries and HopeWorks collaborate on a community initiative as part of the project's approval process. The project, a community park and recreational center, was meant to serve as a symbol of corporate responsibility and social benefit. Both Alexander and Sarah were reluctant but had no choice but to work together. Their first joint meeting was tense, each trying to maintain control over the project's direction. "We need to ensure this project is done right," Sarah insisted. "The community's needs must come first." Alexander, feeling cornered, nodded curtly. "Fine, but we need to keep costs under control. I don't want this turning into a charity case." As they began working on the project, small moments of understanding began to emerge. During site visits, Alexander saw firsthand the impact of Sarah's work and the genuine gratitude of the community members. He started to appreciate the value of Sarah's approach, recognizing that a positive reputation could be as powerful as financial gain. One evening, after a particularly long day, Alexander and Sarah found themselves alone at the project site. They sat on a bench, watching the sunset over the city. You know, Alexander began, breaking the silence, I never really thought about the people affected by my decisions. It was always about the bottom line. Sarah looked at him, her expression softening. It's not too late to change that, Alexander. Everyone has the potential to make a positive impact. It just takes the will to see beyond the numbers. For the first time, Alexander considered the possibility of a different approach. The more he worked with Sarah, the more he saw the merit in her values. She was opening his eyes to a new way of thinking, one that balanced profit with purpose. As they continued their collaboration, Alexander's attitude began to shift. He started incorporating Sarah's suggestions, and they found a rhythm in their partnership. Sarah, in turn, saw glimpses of Alexander's humanity and the potential for him to become a force for good. As the community park project progressed, Alexander and Sarah's interactions became less adversarial and more collaborative. They spent long hours planning, budgeting, and overseeing construction, each contributing their expertise to ensure the project's success. Gradually, the walls between them began to crumble, replaced by a growing sense of mutual respect. One afternoon, as they walked through the park to inspect the progress, Sarah pointed out a plot where a community garden was to be planted. "This area will be perfect for the garden," she said, her eyes lighting up with excitement. "It'll give residents a place to grow their own food and teach kids about sustainability." Alexander nodded, seeing the practical benefits. "It sounds like a good idea. How much will it cost?" Sarah smiled. "Not as much as you might think. We can use volunteers and donations for most of it. People are eager to contribute when they see the positive impact." Alexander was struck by her optimism and the genuine joy she found in her work. "You really believe in this, don't you?" he asked, a hint of admiration in his voice. "Of course," Sarah replied, her gaze steady. "It's not just about the garden. It's about building a sense of community and giving people a stake in their own neighborhood. That's what makes a real difference." For the first time, Alexander saw the depth of Sarah's commitment and understood the significance of her work. It wasn't just about charity. It was about empowerment and change. As the days turned into weeks, Alexander and Sarah's relationship deepened. They began to share more about their lives and experiences, finding common ground in unexpected places. One evening, after a particularly challenging day dealing with bureaucratic hurdles, they sat on a bench overlooking the park, the soft glow of streetlights casting a warm light around them. Alexander opened up about his father's illness, something he rarely discussed with anyone. "My father was always my biggest influence," Alexander confessed, his voice tinged with sadness. "He taught me everything I know about business, but he was also a hard man. He never showed much affection, always pushing me to be the best, to never show weakness." Sarah listened intently, her heart aching for him. "That must have been difficult," she said softly. "It's hard when the people we love don't know how to show it." Alexander nodded, grateful for her understanding. "I guess I learned to be tough because of him. But now, with him being sick, I realize how much I missed out on. I don't want to make the same mistakes." Sarah reached out and placed her hand on his. "It's never too late to change, Alexander. You're already taking steps in the right direction. Look at what we're doing here. This park is going to make a real difference." Her touch was comforting, and for the first time in a long while, Alexander felt a sense of peace. He looked into her eyes and saw the compassion and strength that had always been there, qualities that were now drawing him closer to her. Their shared moments of vulnerability began to build a bond between them. They found themselves confiding in each other, seeking solace and advice. Alexander started to value Sarah's perspective not just professionally, but personally as well. One night, as they were wrapping up another long day, Alexander looked at Sarah and said, "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad we're working together. You've taught me a lot about what it means to truly care about something." Sarah smiled, a warmth spreading through her. "And you've shown me that change is possible, even in the most unlikely places. We make a pretty good team, don't we?" Alexander's eyes softened as he gazed at her. "Yes, we do." As their respect and attraction for each other grew, so did Alexander's transformation. He started to implement more socially responsible practices at Drake Industries, inspired by Sarah's unwavering commitment to her cause. He initiated programs to support local communities, improved employee conditions, and set up sustainable practices within the company. One pivotal moment occurred during a board meeting when Alexander proposed a new corporate social responsibility (CSR) initiative. The board members were skeptical, concerned about the financial implications. "We need to invest in our communities," Alexander argued passionately. "It's not just about profit anymore. It's about doing what's right and building a legacy we can be proud of." Richard Lawson, one of the board members who had previously opposed Alexander, looked at him with newfound respect. "You've changed, Alexander, and I think this is the kind of change we need." The board approved the initiative, marking a significant shift in the company's direction. Alexander felt a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced before, realizing that his work was finally making a positive impact. In the weeks that followed, the community park project reached completion. The grand opening was a joyous event, with residents coming together to celebrate. Alexander and Sarah stood side by side, watching the children play and the community come alive. As they looked at each other, a silent understanding passed between them. They had both grown and changed through their collaboration, finding strength and inspiration in each other. Alexander turned to Sarah, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Sarah, for everything." Sarah smiled, her heart full. "Thank you, Alexander, for believing in change." The changes in Alexander's life and business practices continued to evolve as he embraced a more compassionate and socially responsible approach. The transformation wasn't overnight. It was a gradual process marked by small but significant steps. He began to genuinely care about the people affected by his business decisions, recognizing the importance of ethical leadership. At Drake Industries, the new corporate social responsibility initiatives started to bear fruit. Employee morale improved significantly as Alexander introduced better working conditions, fair wages, and opportunities for professional development. The company also began investing in sustainable technologies, reducing its environmental footprint and setting an example for others in the industry. One day, Alexander decided to visit the community park alone. As he walked through the vibrant space, now filled with laughter and life, he saw firsthand the positive impact of the project. Children played on the swings, families gathered for picnics, and the community garden thrived under the care of local volunteers. It was a stark contrast to the barren lot that had once stood there. He found himself at the community garden, where an elderly woman was tending to the plants. She looked up and smiled. "This garden has brought so much joy to us. We're grateful for what you and Sarah have done." Alexander felt a deep sense of fulfillment. "It's Sarah you should thank. She's the heart and soul behind all of this." The woman shook her head. "It takes more than one person to make a change. You both did this together." The true test of Alexander's transformation came when he faced a critical decision that could either revert him to his old ways or solidify his newfound values. A lucrative deal with a major corporation promised significant financial gain, but required compromising on the ethical standards he and Sarah had worked hard to establish. During a meeting with his executive team, Alexander was presented with the proposal. "This deal could boost our profits by 30%, one of his executives said enthusiastically. Alexander looked at the proposal, his mind racing. The old Alexander would have jumped at the opportunity without a second thought. But now he hesitated. He knew the deal involved practices that went against the principles he had come to embrace. He took a deep breath and stood up. "We're not going through with this deal," he announced. The room fell silent, stunned by his decision. "But, sir, the financial benefits," another executive began. "I understand the benefits," Alexander interrupted. "But we've committed to being a responsible and ethical company. This deal goes against everything we stand for now. We'll find other opportunities that align with our values." After the meeting, Alexander called Sarah to tell her about his decision. She listened quietly, and when he finished, there was a pause. "I'm proud of you, Alexander," she said finally. "You made the right choice. His heart swelled with gratitude and relief. "I couldn't have done it without you, Sarah. You've changed me in ways I never thought possible." Alexander's decision marked a turning point not just for him but for Drake Industries. The company's new direction attracted positive media attention, and their reputation as a socially responsible business grew. Investors who valued ethical practices flocked to support them, and the company thrived in ways Alexander had never imagined. Employees felt proud to work for a company that prioritized people over profit, and the community continued to benefit from the various initiatives Alexander and Sarah implemented. Drake Industries became a model for corporate responsibility, proving that success and integrity could go hand in hand. As for Alexander and Sarah, their relationship blossomed beyond their professional collaboration. They became a source of strength and support for each other, facing challenges together and celebrating their victories. Their bond deepened, built on a foundation of respect, shared values, and a mutual desire to make the world a better place. One evening, as they strolled through the community park that had become a symbol of their journey, Alexander turned to Sarah. "I never imagined my life could change so much," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "And I have you to thank for it." Sarah smiled, her eyes reflecting the love and pride she felt. "You had it in you all along, Alexander. I just helped you see it." He took her hand, and they continued walking, ready to face the future together. They knew there would be more challenges ahead, but they were confident in their ability to overcome them, guided by the values they now shared. Years later, the impact of Alexander's transformation was evident. Drake Industries had grown into a powerhouse of ethical business practices, inspiring other companies to follow suit. The community park thrived, serving as a reminder of the power of collaboration and compassion. Alexander and Sarah's partnership extended beyond their professional lives. They worked together on various social initiatives, continuing to make a positive impact on the world. Their relationship, built on love and mutual respect, became a beacon of hope for those around them. The legacy they created was one of redemption and transformation, proving that even the most ruthless among us could find a path to change. Alexander Drake's journey from a ruthless CEO to a compassionate leader served as a testament to the power of positive relationships and the enduring impact of doing what's right. And in the end, they lived not just as successful individuals, but as true partners in every sense, leaving a lasting legacy that inspired future generations.